All right, we are recording and good to go. Thank you so much for joining us for HRAI's R32 Factor Fiction, presented in part by ORAC, Ontario Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Contractors Association. We've got a really good presentation for you today, and we're going to be taking questions throughout it. So if you'd like to ask anything of Benjamin Middleton, he's going to be on in just a second. You can do so in the chat feature or the Q&A button. But I did mention his name. We have someone who's going to take us through R32 Factor Fiction. He is Benjamin Middleton. You've seen him before in webinars. He's with Daikin Comfort Technologies, and he's going to take you through the myths, the misconceptions, and the advantages of R32 refrigerants. And that's, yeah. Benjamin, if you don't mind popping on your camera and saying hello.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting us here. We're super excited to be here to go through this presentation with everyone, and glad to be back here again.
Wonderful. Just a couple of more housekeeping items. This is being recorded, so you can find it on HRAI's YouTube page after the fact. And like I said, Benjamin is totally willing to answer some questions throughout, so I will be monitoring those. If you got them, put them in the chat, and we will get to them as soon as we can. With that said, off to you.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm super excited to be able to go over this topic with you. As was said before, if you have any questions, we want to make sure we answer all the questions that you may have. So please feel free to go ahead and put those questions into the chat or into the question and answer feature, and we'll get to as many questions as we can as we walk through this program and start talking about it. So we've been talking about R32 for quite a while, and just talking about the low GWP refrigerants. Daikin made a commitment to transition over to R32 back in 2019, and we've been working towards that. We actually started to bring some product to the market back in 2020. Was the first time that we brought R32 into the state of Florida. That was where our very first R32 product was installed in North America. But Daikin has been installing systems since 2012 in Japan and Asia and other parts of the world. So R32 has been around for quite a while. In fact, R32 was created back in the 1950s, where it was used in the process of making microchips and circuit boards, and was adopted for being used as a single component refrigerant in 2012. But you may remember when we made the transition to 410A, and that's where Carrier and Daikin actually worked together to introduce R32 into the air conditioning market, as it was 50% of the blend for 410A. So many of you guys have been using R32 for a long time. You just may not have known it, but it is one of the components that is in 410A. And so we're going to just talk a little bit about R32, how we got to where we're at, and what sort of benefits that you and your customers will realize as we bring more of this product to market. I will say that all of our distribution points are stocked with product. So if you need R32 units, we have those available for you, and we have plenty of refrigerant available for everybody to be able to get. I would encourage you to make sure that you have supplies of this as you're going into the hot summer season. I know that it is hot right now up in Canada, and you guys are getting a lot of demand for air conditioning, but you're probably starting to run into units that may have R32 or 454B in there. And so you want to make sure you have the right service gases to be able to take care of your customers as you're working with them. So how did we get here? I want to dispel a little bit of a myth, because I have heard from time to time that maybe some people are thinking, hey, is R32 going to be phased out? I can say, and we've seen this with refrigerants, that nothing lasts forever. But I will tell you that currently, as I look at all legislations in Canada and the United States, there is nothing proposed to drop that low GWP threshold from 700. So in the United States, the AIM Act was passed, and that clearly states that the United States was moving to a minimum GWP threshold of 700 or below. And so when we looked at that, and we looked at all the choices that we had available, that's when Daikin decided, hey, we really do believe R32 is the right way to go because it is proven. We know it's efficient, and I'll get into that a little bit. We know that it's easy. We know that it's available, and we also know that it's very, very sustainable. But all of this really happened because of the Kigali Amendment that was passed. And you will notice in the Kigali Amendment, they talk about HFC phase down. And so many of you probably have seen this chart because a lot of manufacturers have been going out and talking about what this means. But what I really wanted to talk about when we look at this is what it means to homeowners, your consumers, what it means to us as we're servicing equipment. So everybody remembers when we had when we dropped from 100% of our peak production down to 90%. That had an impact on the amount of 410A that could be produced or imported into North America. And so when that dropped down, we actually saw a price increase in 410A. Then in 2024, we dropped down to 60% capacity. And everybody would have thought, okay, that's going to have a dramatic impact on price. But what we largely found is there was very little, if any, impact to the price of 410A at that particular time. And so everybody starts to ask the question, well, why is that? Well, all of the manufacturers, they had bought up the 410A that they knew that they were going to need to make their last push or their last run, if you will, of 410A product. And so when you have all of the manufacturers that are putting refrigerant into units and shipping it out, that's a large portion of all of the refrigerant that's consumed in North America, which left a big opening for a lot of the service gas that is used out there. And so because it was already purchased, it was already stored, and was already accounted for, as the manufacturers were switching over to their low GWP refrigerant that they chose to use, we saw that there was very little impact on price. However, in 2029, and this is the part that I think is really important for everybody to think about, right now we know in North America that about less than 5% of all of the refrigerant that is produced actually comes back to be reclaimed or recycled. And one of the things that's going to be very important as we kind of move forward here is making sure that contractors, manufacturers, distributors all work together to determine and figure out how we can do a better job of reclaiming all of the refrigerants that's out there. That will help with supply. But if we continue on our course in the way that we have been going, what we will find, there are no drop-ins today for 410A, and I don't think we'll see any drop-ins for 410A. So with that being said, when this phase down happens in 2029, we probably will see prices increase similarly to where R22 is today. And so if you think about the R22 prices, if I were to put a product into a customer's home today that has 410A and they have a 10-year warranty, and we get 7-8 years down the road, and let's say something happens with that particular unit where you need refrigerant, the contractor, even if his system is under warranty, if you read many manufacturer warranties that are out there, they have a certain allotment that they give for refrigerant. And so if the prices do go up, the contractor may be on the hook for that refrigerant, or the homeowner is going to be on the hook for that refrigerant for a system that is still in warranty. And so just thinking, putting my contractor hat on when I was in the field, we always wanted to do what was best for our customers. I think most contractors do. And so when I was out in the field, we were always looking for, the long-term impact the customer is going to have with the system. And so for that very reason alone, I would be looking at putting in a system that is going to have the lowest cost of repair and is going to have, gas available for me to be able to put in and service and take care of that customer. And like I said, so R32 being a global commodity, we know that there's plenty of availability on the refrigerant, and we know that it's something that you definitely can give peace of mind to the homeowner when you're out there. And so these little things differentiate you from your competitors when you're out there. When you're sitting there across from the homeowner and talking to them, hey, we're putting in a system that's going to last 15, 20 years. We probably want to put in a refrigerant that is going to be continued to be used and available for the next 15, 20 years when we put that into your home. And so that's one of the things to think about. What I can tell you this chart does not say is that we're going to lower GWP. And I can speak, in the United States and in Canada, obviously the governments work very closely with manufacturers, and they give plenty of heads up that, hey, we're going to be making a change, or we're going to be phasing this down. If any indication of other areas where we're looking globally and what's happening, we don't think it's going to be a small little phase down where they say, hey, we're going to drop from 700 GWP down to 500. And I can say, in Canada went with 750 on their chillers that you're going to see at the end of this year, where all chillers are going down to 750 GWP. Right now, for central air conditioners, it is staying at 2200. But if that were to change, we'll make sure that we inform everybody as we get information and we get updated on that. But when I look at where they may phase down to next, we don't think it's going to be a small drop. It's probably going to be something where they're going to drop it down to 10 GWP. When they do that, we'll probably be looking at natural refrigerants that would be going to, something like, maybe a carbon dioxide or even a propane that may be utilized at that particular point in time. But again, let me be clear, there is no legislation. There is nothing pending right now. There is no indication that that is something that we're doing in the next 5 to 7 years that we know of. So let's talk a little bit about R32 and R454B. One of the other things that we know is systems are getting more and more efficient. As systems get more efficient, one of the things that we've noticed is the units continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. As the units get bigger, it's harder to place them, harder to put them in the places that we want to put them. And so one of the advantages that we look at with R32, and you can see, we were able to take some units and we were able to look at the charge and look at the line set that would be required for each of these particular units. And so I'm just comparing 3-ton systems here. When I look at these 3-ton systems, what I can see is that the Daikin 3-ton system, all of these are similar efficiency, has about 82 ounces worth of refrigerant that's needed for that 3-ton heat pump. Very similar Carrier unit needs 121. Very similar Lennox needs 114. Trane needs 90. Rheem needs 94. The more refrigerant I have in a system, the bigger the system needs to be. That's more steel, that's more aluminum, that's more copper. And so as we look at all of the commodities and everything that's out there, we know that there's a lot of price increases that have happened with that. And so as those price increases happen, all of that cost is passed down to the homeowner. And so one of the things we can realize is we can have less refrigerant in the system. We can also have less raw materials. And so that's one of the big reasons why Daikin's been pushing so hard to our side discharge inverter products. We're able to save the consumer not only money on energy, but also money on the upfront cost. And so I would strongly encourage you to talk to one of your Daikin, Goodman, or Amana reps that are out there, and they can talk to you more about our side discharge inverter products, utilizing R32, and how we can maximize the benefits of this refrigerant to help you succeed as you're going out and talking to your consumers and giving them solutions that are really going to help them, have a system that's going to last a long time and make sure that they're comfortable. The other thing I think a lot of people have heard varying different thoughts as far as, the system pressures and how they operate. If you hit this QR code, you can download one of our pressure temperature charts. And I would strongly encourage you to take a look at it. This will have R22, R410A, R32, and R454B all on the same chart. So it's a great reference for you to be able to have. But you can go ahead and download that particular chart, take a look at it. And if you don't hit the QR code, you can also go to the HVAClearningcampus.com, go to our R32 resources page, and there we have both US and Canadian versions available if you want it in Celsius instead of Fahrenheit. And so we have those available for you to be able to download and utilize at www.hvaclearningcampus.com. But when you start to look at the pressures, you will find all of the pressures are very, very similar across the board. There was a big increase from R22 to 410A, right? But if you look at 410A compared to R32 compared to 454B, we see that there's very similar pressures. And so we don't have to worry, we're not going to hard copper. We're not, and that was one of the, when selecting refrigerants that we were looking at, making sure that we weren't changing the installation practices. And so one of the great things, if you have a line set that's buried in a wall, you can reuse that line set with all of the new refrigerants that we're going to. You don't have to change that line set out. Just make sure that you do clean the line set properly before you go ahead and attach that new unit to it. But this makes it a lot easier for you as you're kind of putting this together and making sure that you have everything that you need. So you may also have heard, R32 systems have reduced operating envelope. Actually, with our higher discharge temperatures that we have, the units are designed for those higher discharge temperatures, and they have been optimized for that. And we actually see better performance because R32 actually has a higher BTU carrying capacity. So that means that we can store more energy. That's why we can use less of a charge inside of the refrigerant. And that gives us more efficiency as we're going through it because we're able to move BTUs around a lot more efficiently by running the compressor speeds at a little bit lower speeds, using less electricity because we're moving less refrigerant through the compressor because of the higher carrying capacity that it has. And so all of these things really, really help to give the performance that you're looking for out of your system. So when it gets really cold out, you have a heat pump that's able to deliver more BTUs and higher temperatures to the customer, giving them more comfort with that heat pump experience. When it gets really hot out like it is right now, you have a system that's able to operate better. For those that have been in the market or in the industry for a while, you probably remember when we moved from R22 to 410A, we actually had, there was shorter line sets. There were, you had more elevation restrictions. The good news is in going to R32, we actually are able to increase the size of line sets. And in many cases, we're actually able to reduce the diameter of the line sets. And so that gives you more flexibility and also cost savings at the job. And so it's all of these little things that add huge benefits to you as you guys are looking at, what do we want to do? How do I best serve my customers? What products do I want to look to align to as I'm putting stuff together? Now, I've also heard, some of our competitors saying, well, it uses a different oil. And that is true. It's still using a POE oil. And so that's really important to understand. It's in the same oil family as 410A and what 454B uses. It's just been optimized, just like you have different weights of oil for your car. This oil has been optimized for R32 and for our compressors to make sure that it doesn't break down and to make sure that you get the best performance out of the system. And so one of the things that people may be concerned about, oh, it's a different oil. What do I do with my gauges? There's been testing that's been done independently. Actually, Copeland conducted a test, and they found that even if you had 5% contamination, and this is either way. So if you had 5% of the oil that's used with R32 introduced into a 410A or a 454B system, it would have no impact on performance. And vice versa, if you had 5% of the oil from a 410A system or from a 454B system introduced into an R32 system, it would have no impact on performance. And so that's really important to understand But I will strongly stress that best practice in the industry is to use a separate gauge for each type of refrigerant that you're working with. But just know that even if there is a risk for contamination, you should always use best practice as far as purging your gauges and making sure that you limit any cross contamination that could occur. If it were to occur, it should have no impact on the performance or life expectancy of the system. And again, that was verified by a study that Copeland did and put together. So you may have heard R32 provides similar installation benefits to its predecessor 410A and another new A2L known as 454B. Now, so there's a difference. Any 400 series refrigerant is a blend, and any blend that you have is going to have some sort of a glide. And so when we look at this, and I'll have a chart a little bit later, you'll see that there is a larger glide with 454B than even 410A. What does that mean? It means the two different temperature or the two different refrigerants that you have in the system, they will boil at different temperatures at different pressures. And so you could potentially have one in a liquid state and one in a gas state. If there was a leak in the system, you could have them leak out at unequal rates, which would change the composition of the refrigerant that you have in the system. When you change the composition of the refrigerant in the system, you lose efficiency, you can lose capacity, you can also lose performance in terms of life expectancy, because it may change the characteristics of even how that is interacting inside of the compressor. Because of all of those reasons, if you notice that there's a leak on a system, the best practice in the industry is you should draw down all of that refrigerant, and then you should charge it from virgin. That's more cost again to the contractor or to the homeowner when you do have a leak in the system. The beauty with a single component refrigerant like R12, like R22, like R32, if I have a leak in the system, I can go ahead and isolate that refrigerant. I can go ahead and take care of the leak that I have. I can release that refrigerant, and then I can top off that unit. And so that saves money for the homeowner. It saves money for the contractor, and it saves time so that you have more ability to go serve more customers that are out there. And so we think that's a really big deal when we take a look at this in terms of serviceability and making sure that it's easier to use. Also means, it's easier for a technician. When I go out and service a unit, I need to make sure that both components are going to be in liquid form or in gas form when I'm performing my superheat and subcool. And so that takes additional training. Whereas with a single component, it's easier to be able to do my calculations, to be able to do the math. And I do know that a lot of gauges do all of the math for technicians today, but they still have to make sure that the system is set up properly to be able to get all those measurements. So just a couple of things I wanted to point out. So I talked about the thermal conductivity. We talked about the carrying capacity. And so I think this is really, really important when you look at that latent heat of vaporization at the boiling point. You'll see that R32 is sitting at 318 kilojoules per kilogram. So it absorbs more heat during phase change. And that's where I was talking about that BTU carrying capacity that we have. We see that we get more of that latent heat into the system. And so that's going to give you better performance when the system is operating out there. We also can see the temperature glide. So like I said, 410A is sitting at 0.1, where 454B is sitting at 1.5. And so that's the varying in the boiling point. Best practice with 410A was if I lost 50% of my charge, I should go ahead and recover all the refrigerant and charge it with virgin. I'm not sure what manufacturers are recommending, but I can point out that the temperature glide is greater with 454B. Again, with a single component, you don't have to worry about that. And so that really helps you when you start to take a look at it. You take a look at the specific heat of R32. And again, you can see that it stores more at 25C. And you take a look at and so you just get better performance out of the refrigerant. Here's where I do want to point something off, because I think a lot of people I've seen this out on social media. If a system is designed for R32, you can only use R32 in it. If a system is designed for 454B, you can only use 454B in it. You can't mix and match these refrigerants. And it's because all of these differences that I'm pointing out here, these characteristics, they behave differently. And so you don't know what's going to happen if you introduce a different refrigerant into that system. And, it could open a contractor up to more liability. I will tell you, a lot of times, manufacturers do everything they can to honor warranties, but if for whatever reason they asked to have that compressor back and they found that a different refrigerant was used in that compressor, you run the risk of, that warranty potentially being voided. And so there's more risk that the contractor's taking on. In terms of efficiency, when you change the refrigerant, who knows what the efficiency is going to be of the system. In terms of BTU performance, I don't know what size that system is anymore. And so there's all kinds of variables that change because these all have different characteristics that are there. We've got some great information here. Again, here's some more QR codes for you to take a look at. We have our distributor locator. So if you're looking for one of our distributors that can help you with making sure that you can get the refrigerant that you need, we're more than happy to help you out there. We also have some more details about the A2O refrigerants and shortages. I would highly recommend that you read up on this because I think, again, there's a little bit of the toilet paper syndrome going on in the industry right now, where everybody's kind of buying up 454B, which is creating some false shortages that are out there. So make sure you get what you need. But I do know that they'll work through this. I can say, Daikin, we had our challenges. We went through our transition, and now we're seeing other manufacturers that are going through 454B. They're having some of their challenges that they have. But we want to be there to help and give you what you need. But I can't stress enough that you got to put the right refrigerant in the unit and what that unit is designed for. That's super important as you continue to move forward. As we kind of wrap this up, we do have our R32 resource portal. So I would encourage you to bookmark that. We continue to put more information there. You'll see our R32 reasons why we believe R32 really is just the best choice. And we can hopefully answer a lot of questions that you have. I would love to open it up for questions here and see what questions we may have from our audiences out there.
There you go. You've got them right here, folks. If you'd like to ask a question about R32 or anything you saw in the presentation, please do. You can type them down in the webinar chat or the Q&A. Now, do you have, and you've got the QR code right there in front of me.
Yeah.
Is there direct email or phone or website we can point them to as well?
Yeah, so this is a website. That QR code is going to take them right to a website, R32 Reasons. There's a contact us on there. So if you have specific questions, but there's a ton of resources. There's white papers if you really want to get into the engineering data and you want to pull that down. There's a lot of just facts. We've got some great little short videos that you can put on your websites. If you've got customers going to your websites and they have questions, we wanted to make some real quick, short little YouTube videos. Please utilize the materials, put them up on your website. Customer education is important as we go through any transition. I think there can be a lot of confusion. I've heard some customers saying, oh no, we're going to propane. You got to understand it's an A2L. It's slightly flammable. It's not, it is not propane. We have not done that yet. So there's not something that, really, I think it's just giving customers information so that there's not a lot of fear of the unknown as we make this transition and make this change.
Wonderful. Now, look, I'm assuming everyone on the call knows how to use a QR code, but I'm going to pretend my dad's watching. If you, if you have any trouble, most phones allow you now to open up your camera app, point it right at the QR code, and it'll take you right to that website. So that's all you got to do. It'll automatically detect the QR code. I don't see any questions right now, which means everyone knows everything they need to know about R32.
All
No,
right,
no questions at
wonderful.
all. Yeah. But you know what? I appreciate it. We got a half hour left so people can get an extra long lunch, or they can scan that QR code and start watching videos.
All right, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate being on here.
Likewise, and thank you so much for joining us again, Benjamin. I hope you come back. And yeah, thank you so much to ORAC for co-sponsoring this webinar as well.
All right, thank you.
Have a great day. Cheers.